power on.
Accessing historical database. Year 2020. The tech giants become aware of the greatest threat to their corporatist domination. An obscure science and tech podcast becomes a major factor in a peaceful open source revolt against the military Silicon Valley industrial complex. The podcast, Sovryn Tech. Its host, Dr. Brian Sovryn. The tech giants tried to stop Sovryn Tech. They can't.
Woo! The show that stands above all the nonsense, that does what it always does every week. Here for you, baby. The Golden Stallion, the man of tomorrow, Sabzu, the rated R radio star, ready to get into everything that we've got to talk about this week. And we do have a lot in these interesting times, as we often say. But of course, how does one survive a crazy world? Well, you do so by being crazier than the world. No, you do so by hopefully finding some way to just inject, to mainline, do a tap that big vein right there. Yo, woo! Mainline some sanity into your life. And, well, I have the honor of getting to do that from time to time. So, again, like I said, we do have a lot to talk about here. A lot of stories to get into. I mean, so many, actually, in fact, somebody in the Sovryn Tech Telegram group even commented on this. I mean, just and look, we're just talking about science and tech, but the news cycle there is insane. Okay, to say nothing, nothing else is going on, or say nothing of anything else is going on, and he's not wrong. Like, I could have done. I think I even responded to him with that. I said, really, I could have done Sovryn Tech every day. And it's the hardest part of doing this week's episode was, okay, what don't we talk about? Because there's just so much. Fortunately, I do not exist in a vacuum as far as podcasting goes. And there are great podcasts out there like Security Now by Steve Gibson, of course, and others who will often cover a lot of the stories that I just, once a week, 2 hours a week, don't always have the time to, to deep dive on or get into. So they're out there. You don't just have to listen to me. I would never recommend that you just listen to me, but please, no, don't. But regardless, we'll get into a lot of that here. In fact, our lead story, we've got some little stuff to get into in the beginning here during the foreplay, but our lead story is very much going to be about podcasting in general, which I don't feel like not that I want there to be podcasts about podcasting. I know they exist, right? But, as far as like the larger, podcasting is very important, frankly, especially right now, because podcasting is one of those remarkable transmittive technologies that does not require shall we say, a lot of the permissions that other forms of entertainment, and not just entertainment, but also educational resources. It doesn't require much of a budget. In fact, it requires practically none. If you have a smartphone, you could podcast these days. I mean, there's whole platforms that are actually built around you building a mini podcasting empire on your smartphone, right? Or if you have a laptop, all the better. And you can get really, really great professional sounding stuff going on. I mean, for pennies, effectively, especially in comparison to any other form of entertainment. And there's plenty of ways to host all of that, your podcast, and get it out there to people for what is effectively for free. It's remarkable in that, because when you realize how much financial incentives, advertising, whatever else, or just, messages coming down from the boys on the board, right? What do you say, boys? Okay. Some will get that joke. You don't have a whole lot of control over what you can say. We're going to get into that a little bit later. But it's important to talk about podcasting sometimes at a high level and how it relates to all of us, because it is such a powerful medium. It is and I dare say it's unique, because most of you listen to podcasts, with headphones on, and, it's somebody that is right between your ears. They are, for all intents and purposes, inside your brain. Okay. And that's very personal. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, because there has been some big news and some big shakeups happening in the podcasting space that I think are worthwhile to discuss. And they're particularly worthwhile right now. But before I get into that, speaking of, getting in people's heads, I want to get into your minds, I want to hear from you. And in so doing, I teased this on the last episode of Sovryn Tech. I said, you know what? I think we should create a call-in line where people can call in and leave a voicemail, or I should say a voicemail line, not necessarily a call-in line, because it won't be happening live, at least not at this time. But where you could leave a voicemail and we could cover it during, when we go over like listener questions, during important messages, during our bit of Q&A that we do on every episode, where I could actually play the audio of you making your point. And you don't actually, that's the thing too, is it doesn't have to be a question. It could be you making a point that you wanted to bring up. And I would love to do that. I've had listeners in the past do reviews, honestly, that they've done reviews of products, and, they happen to get it. And I know that they're, brilliant, because you're listening to this show, goddammit. And so I went ahead and just injected the review right into the show, and I thought it was awesome. It turned out great. So, whatever you want to do, any kind of audio you want to send my way. I mean, of course I'm going to qualify it. And if I don't want to use it, I don't want to use it. Or if I would try to steer clear of editing things. Okay. But at the very least, I would tell you if I edited in some way. I try to be transparent about that. Just in case if it's a matter of time, but it is through Skype, just so you know. The phone number is in the show notes, but I'll say it out loud here, and it's 1, as in North America, United States, 1-347-474-0069. Woo! How about that number? But again, that's 1-347-474-0069. And that will, now when you call that number, you're going to get a generic voicemail, because it is being done through Skype. And there's reasons I went with Skype particularly. There are other options that people had sent to me, and each one of them had some kind of issue. Either, frankly, they're ridiculously expensive. And before I put that kind of money down, I'd like to know that this is going to get used a lot, right? Or there were limitations on the length of the audio message being sent, which, I don't want that. I don't want you getting cut off after 5 minutes if you have more to say, or want to explain more after the fact or whatever. There were varying reasons that I decided to go with Skype. And so that's what I don't like using Skype, obviously, even though admittedly Microsoft has been a little better about, making Skype a viable platform on just about every operating system on the planet. Regardless, I don't like using it, but we'll try this out. We'll see how you use it, how it takes shape, how it works. And, it's a bit of an experiment, and, it's important in podcasting to constantly grow, to constantly change and shift. I mean, I change the tone, the tenor, I change the format often, at least every 6 months or every year on Sovryn Tech, depending, because I do like to keep things fresh. That's very important. So Anyway, we'll try this out, but you can call in. You'll get, like I said, you'll get a generic voicemail, so it won't say that it's for Sovryn Tech. So make sure you're just getting the number right, and leave your message. It's probably a good idea to, write it out, what you want to say. I mean, this is true even if it were a live call-in show. I remember when I used to do, actually Sovryn Tech sponsor Free Talk Live. When I used to be a host on Free Talk Live, we would recommend that to people. Write down what you want to say when you call in, and that's live. This isn't live, and so you have even better opportunities to try that out. You're also open to, if you're in the Telegram group, frankly, you could send me the audio file if you wanted to record it and make sure it turned out how you wanted it to. I'm open to that as well. But if you just want to do a call in or whatever, rock and roll, use Skype for it. And there you go. So I look forward to hearing your questions and your thoughts. I'm really excited for this. I got such tremendous response, people wanting it. So it's set up now. It's ready to go. And again, it'll go right to voicemail very quickly. So just call in 347-474-0069. Love it. Yeah. Anyway, so there you have it. Go for it. Use it. Again, it's in the show notes as well to make sure you get the right number. Let's start talking up some other stuff here. So I was, I did update. We talked about this on the last episode of Sovryn Tech, and Microsoft did, I want to say it was Monday or maybe, it was just a few days ago, that they did finally release, Windows 10 update 2004. They're calling it the May update. But its technical number is 2004 as in 420, which they, the 2004 Windows 2004 jokes are great, but the Windows 420 jokes would have been on a whole other level, but we're not going to get those. But that's all it really means, is referencing April 2020. That's what that code number means. Anyway, so I updated, one machine that I have here that is running Windows. The update went fine. I've been using it for a few days. I have not run into any issues. It did not, they are doing an even slower rollout than they've done with other updates. Of course, it appears to some degree that Microsoft is learning their lesson, about, they're not, I don't even think they really made like a big announcement about it. They announced it. And generally the way you can get it is you go into, updates and security or whatever, and in the settings panel. And then if you ever decide to, check for updates and not just have them download automatically, but you like proactively check for them, it'll give you an option below saying, okay, hey, the Windows 2004 or the May 2020 updates out. Would you like to, install it? I did not, and I was using, an Asus. I was using a newer VivoBook, was it S512 or whatever. And it did not, no matter how many times I did that after it was announced that it was, released fully, it never gave me the option to download it that way. So I had to go and get the update assistant from Microsoft's site. And then it took it. And again, I haven't run into any issues whatsoever. And I've been using this particular laptop, pretty heavily over the past few days for varying reasons. So, I think if there was going to be an issue or anything like super serious, I probably would have noticed it by now. But again, Windows runs on so many different hardware configurations. And that's why Microsoft is doing such a slow rollout. You just can't tell, how that's going to work, or if it's going to work for you without any issues. So I'm not saying to run out there and get it right now. In fact, as we have been talking about many times on this show, especially over the past few months, if people want to upgrade Windows, upgrade to Ubuntu, upgrade to Linux, okay? Version 2004 is out and it's going to last you 10 years. Jump on that shit. So I'm not recommending anybody go out and update. I would wait if I were you. I have not seen, and we reviewed this last episode as well. I'm not seeing any, we'll talk about some of this, but I'm not really seeing any features that are just, oh, holy shit, I've got to have this right now. There's nothing like that. So just when Microsoft is finally ready to serve it to your hardware configuration, and yes, they know what your hardware configuration is. Should that bother you? Of course. But they know, just take it when it comes. Okay. And even then, if you're really, I mean, I do recommend when Microsoft recommends it, I'll go ahead and say, yeah, go ahead and install it. But the real answer here is, just get away from Windows anyway in the home. If you're using it for professional purposes, of course, we've discussed that many times. Fine. There's very specific software that gets between you and you making your money and blah, blah, blah. Okay. Then, go ahead and keep rocking Windows. But for everybody else that's just doing their personal little shit on it, and I don't say that disparagingly, but you get my point, get off of Windows already. Anyway, so that is, that's out there. And again, we'll have a conversation. You know what? Let's have it now. Okay. I was going to say, we're going to have a conversation around something else because Microsoft had their build conference where and of course it was all virtual right now, right? COVID-19. But where they announced various things, and it makes sense that the 2004 update would come out not long after that. But something that they did release that I actually want to take some time to talk about. So one of the major differences in the 2004 update, okay, is it has to do with Cortana. Now, years ago on this show, I talked about how ultimately in the future, and I did not put a set timeline on this, okay, but I mean, I was predicting at least 10 years away at the time, okay, and you can base that upon when Cortana was effectively initially announced. And my prediction was that eventually Cortana is really what Microsoft wants to be the operating system. Okay. You are not going to, and I have a term for this, which is HUI. Okay. As in, I think it's a bunch of HUI. HUI is HUI, which stands for hands-free user interface. Okay. Now, for years, people have called this Zero UI, or there have been a couple other names. And in fact, now there is a new term out there that I want you to be, I don't want you to be terrified, but I want you to be kind of like contact tracing, which we're going to talk about later again, because I said, add this to your lexicon. Here's a new term for your lexicon: spatial computing. And it's a bad idea across the board. Okay. But spatial computing is effectively the idea that you don't have a traditional, it's computing done without a screen in front of your face. So it could be done by voice, could be done by, twisting your hands in the air, could be maybe some degree of, to some degree it has to do with augmented reality or virtual reality, which does require a screen, I understand. But you get my point that it's not a traditional, two-dimensional little screen in front of you that you interact with. And this term, this is becoming a thing that people are really pushing. Now, to some degree, it's being pushed by certain sectors of, shall we say, the tech world, because they have a lot of money riding in VR and AR and MR and, I don't know, SR and fuck R and just pick your R, pick your reality. All of them are fucked. So it might as well all be FR. There's a new term for you. Fucked reality. But I have too much fun with this sometimes. Okay. So spatial computing is this concept. And I'm going to use this term a lot from now on because again, it's all crap. Okay. Because basically spatial computing, and the reason I say, and maybe I'll start using this term that I literally just came up with, fucked reality, of FR, because it eliminates your ability to control, what you're interacting with, okay, digitally or frankly, even in meat space, right? Because spatial computing would also include, you've seen those videos that sometimes they're done as a, in a more fear-mongering fashion. Sometimes they're done like, Microsoft does their videos where it's 20 years in the future and, oh, isn't this grand and blah, blah, blah. But, like these videos where you're walking into a grocery store and the prices for everything, there's no labels on the actual shelves. Everything is just popping up in different colors and all that stuff. like right in front of you in augmented reality effectively. Okay. But all these things, and you think that's a very simple example, and you think, well, what harm could be done with that? Ultimately, take those, keep adding that to other ways that you interact with the world, and eventually you completely lose control of your own reality. And not only that, you can't even interact with others, because if you don't, pop on the AR goggles or whatever, you can't relate with people, right? Because you have no common frame of reference. And anyway, I'm getting down areas that are much larger and require, frankly, a multi-episode series to really discuss. We've talked a lot about this, and because there's a reason I call it hooey, right? As in it's bullshit. We talked a lot about it over the years, and at some point maybe we'll get into it a little bit deeper, but we will touch on it here. Okay, but it comes in a two-stage process, because one is understanding, and I still stand by the theory that I have, the prediction, that Cortana, because Cortana is really just Azure, right? Which is all of Microsoft servers and cloud services. Okay, that's all that Cortana is really a front end for that. All right. Now, in update 2004 for Windows 10, Cortana has been removed from being deeply baked into the operating system. Now, you might see this as Microsoft forfeiting or conceding in the virtual assistant space. It's them saying, well, Alexa, Siri, and Google Assistant have won and we didn't win, so we're stepping back. I don't know what this update to Cortana, how much of that affects Cortana on Android, and I think Cortana is on iOS as well. I haven't installed it on my iPod Touch, but regardless, I'm not sure how it's going to take shape there, but basically Microsoft's verbiage around this, or their marketing around this, is that we are going to make Cortana more focused on productivity. So Cortana is going to be more helpful to you within the realm of your Microsoft 365 account, right? And now, like the app does not, and this is what's key, because I think there is the confusion that because it's getting pulled out of, the really like deep into the kernel of Windows 10, that somehow, again, they are backpedaling on Cortana development. I don't think that's true, because really all they're doing is that turning it into an app and something that gets updated through the Microsoft Store is just allowing them to add more features and be more agile with Cortana's implementation than having to wait for twice a year or for monthly cumulative updates. But they could update Cortana by the day or multiple times a day if they wanted to at this stage. And the one advantage for the user, in my opinion, of, basically unbaking, that's not even a word, but unbaking Cortana from the Windows 10 cake, the one advantage a consumer would have is, and this is the first thing I did as soon as I installed update 2004, is I said, okay, so can I go and uninstall Cortana then completely? If it's just a separate app, that's great. If it's not in the operating system anymore, no, you can't. Or at least you can't traditionally. Maybe there's a PowerShell script where you could do that. But anyway, my point here is that Cortana, they are backpedaling on Cortana in certain ways, yes, but I think in many ways this is them doubling down on Cortana. All right. And them pulling it away from, the core of Windows 10 is really more about making Cortana more ubiquitous, not about lessening its impact. Okay. Because as we've, talked about also and kind of predicted, is that eventually Microsoft is Microsoft is stepping away from Windows in general. And in fact, they might open source it someday and, really make it a completely free, operating system. And it won't matter because you are going to be paying for your subscription service. You're going to be giving them their allowance money with a Microsoft 365 account. Now, so if Windows doesn't really matter, then what matters? Well, I think you've got a key, and not that this is new because Microsoft has experimented with headphones before, but they are going in the same direction that Google saw and that Apple, of course, saw years ago with AirPods, which, you know what? I keep reading that somehow people have come to accept AirPods as not looking strange. No, motherfuckers. No, I'm not sorry. I was going to say I'm sorry. No, I'm not sorry. That still looks like cum dripping out of your ears. They look ridiculous. And I think they're still completely impractical. If you actually, and look, I've tried, okay? Because eventually I was like, oh, can I just try your AirPods on? I just want to see what this is like. And so I popped them in, and to say nothing around the concerns around Bluetooth and all that shit being that, so, blood-brain barrier, and not even going to go there. Okay. We don't have to go that direction. Though I really wish Steve Gibson would, but because he talked about it recently, but anyway, we're not going there. Forget about that. I'm like, okay, let me just see if I, for some reason, want to, just go for, on a sprint, or, I got to run for some reason. And in the world we're in right now, fucking A, you might find yourself, you might have to start running out of nowhere, right? Or you might have to climb a ladder, or you might have to climb a tree. I don't know. Okay. Basically, if you have to instantly jump into action to say, do something as simple as, I don't know, survive. Would that, how much do AirPods cost? Over $100, whatever. Now, granted, if you're just trying to survive, do your AirPods matter? No, of course they don't. Okay. But just if you just instantly, want to get into motion, because I see, and I can't believe this. I mean, back when the gyms were open, back when, I'd see people wearing those at the gym, and I'm like, how the fuck do you work out with that without losing those things? And I guess people just don't actually move, I mean, it's like they're stone figures or something. Because the instant I just went into a brisk run wearing those AirPods, I mean, they just flew out of my ears. Now, I don't have over large ears or anything along those lines, but I mean, people have known that this is a thing since the 80s, back when we had those stupid little earbuds and those. No, AirPods are dumb. Okay. I mean, they look dumb. They function in a way that I think is antithetical, but they function in a similar way. Now, because actually, and I think Microsoft's response to this idea of having an assistant directly in your ear, which is ultimately, I mean, AirPods are, what is the purpose of AirPods? We talked about it when they first came out. It's the same thing I'm going to say about the Surface earbuds, which Microsoft just released. Okay. It is eventually Apple wants you to get away from the smartphone itself, from the iPhone itself. And no, they're not making an ass ton of money off of iPhones right now. They're not. Okay. That's why they stopped showing their numbers as to investors and thus the rest of the world to how many iPhones they're selling per year. Eventually they want to get to where you are completely interacting with your Apple ecosystem, which you're probably in if you have an iPhone, not guaranteed, but you probably are, through Siri, and Siri you interact with through, your AirPods. Okay. All of this gets into a big conversation around 5G, and that's why all these companies are so hot about 5G, because then they can eliminate more and more devices until eventually they are just completely in your ear. But again, like we've said this whole time, as soon as you remove as you remove interfaces, you lose control. And you become beholden to what Apple, Microsoft, Google, go down the list of the Sinister Six of tech giants. You become beholden to what they put on offer for you and how they want you to interact. So Microsoft has come out with earbuds, and these things, they don't look much better than the AirPods. At least it doesn't look like jizz coming out of your ear. But it does look like a giant, it's like a white pad. It's almost like it looks like if you stuffed cotton into your ear. Okay. I do like that they are, and I know AirPods are the same, but where they're not, it doesn't suction cup into your ear. That's good. But it's of such a size that it fits well enough into your ear cavity. And so, it has a little bit of a better look. It's definitely noticeable when you are wearing them. Okay. And they were showing these off. They've had, I mentioned those videos where they show 10 years in the future, 20 years in the future. And these videos are actually very interesting to watch from Microsoft, where they're showing their version of the future and all that. They showed these in the past in some of those videos. In fact, I think it was like in 2015, they had that productivity future vision. So this has been planned for about as long as since I was predicting that this is the direction they were going. Actually, I was predicting it before 2015, but clearly I think I accurately saw, where they were going with all of this. So these things sell for $200. For $200, they don't do much. Okay. And they also, to operate, at least at this time, they need to be connected to an app on your smartphone. So that, and they operate on swipe features and all this, which they're big enough to where they could have had buttons on them. I'm reminded of Plantronics when Plantronics updated their Backbeat Fit a couple of years ago. They went away from originally their Backbeat Fit, which is a Bluetooth headset, really minimal. Probably the best Bluetooth headset ever made if you're into Bluetooth, and I understand if you're not. The Bluetooth headset still had like so many little buttons on it where you could control a lot of functions, volume, go to the next track, pause, all this different stuff, right? And I really like that. Then when they came out with an updated model, I guess it was like the Pro 3000 or whatever the fuck they named it. Then they went to all swiping motions. And I hated that. I mean, I really like it did not work. And in fact, there were even times where like my sweat would drip off and it would act as a swiping motion. I mean, it was just completely inefficient compared to just having a nice little button on the goddamn thing. So I think that, this idea of just having a touch surface is a fail in and of itself, but whatever. I know this is the direction that everything's going. But I mean, I got to give it credit for having some kind of touch functionality, some kind of, not totally hands-free UI, right? Perhaps unlike the AirPods that, does allow you to do some things a little more privately without having it to solely rely upon voice commands. I'll give it that. But ultimately, there's a link in the show notes for you to check them out. Ultimately, I feel like the Surface earbuds are where Microsoft wants you to go. Okay. As in the Surface earbuds will be where you interact mostly with your data from, however that takes shape. Even if something like, and granted that means somebody else. You're never going to you can't get rid of completely the keyboard, but I'm sure Microsoft would love it. For varying reasons, because they are so knee deep in the enterprise space, is if in society at large that they made the keyboard something that you only interacted with at work, which also happens to be where your Microsoft 365 account comes in, right? So I think these earbuds are pointing more at the future and it's part of productivity. And even when they were first, thought up at Microsoft itself, they considered it part of their productivity vision. And again, that was 5 years ago. So this is the direction that they want to point you. I don't think I should have to tell you, again, it's not that they, want to add this on to everything else that you have. It's that ultimately they want to eliminate all of the other interfaces that you have. And that's basically the marketing that they're putting around these earbuds alone. And I think that this is the same direction that every company wants to go. Apple wants to go this direction because, again, it gives them more control. You become more hooked, right? For just a quick example, good luck. Say you want to use a different app how about with Android? Okay. Let's say with Android, which allows you to install other app stores. Hey, maybe you'd like to use a different app with amazing functionality that's just not allowed on the Play Store. Is this a reality? Does this happen often? Yes, it does. Or you just want to use a version of the app that maybe doesn't track the fuck out of you. Great. Okay. So try doing that with these earbuds. Like, how do you even install an alternative app? Do you see my point? They're trying to get you they're already closed gardens, but they're trying to close them even deeper, even further. And that's the real point here with this. So I don't think that Microsoft, again, is ultimately backpedaling on Cortana. No, with the earbuds, they are doubling down on it. Are they going to get very far with the $200 price? I mean, Surface products have been trying to be more aspirational for ever since they started. At $200, you're not going to get a groundswell because these just don't do enough. I mean, they have great sound, but there's nothing, there's no real killer app, no pun intended. There's no real killer app with these to make people want them for $200. If they were $100, even then, I mean, you'd have to get to $50 where you could somehow convince everybody to jump on it. But unlike other earbuds of this kind, or in this vein, I should say, I don't know that there's a way to cut the cost because it's not just a speaker, right? Like there's some actual, pretty serious, technology involved in making these do what they do because they are two independent, earbuds and so on, which I mean, I understand that's also part of why AirPods cost so much. As to where Google was able to do it with a little bit less, but that's because they weren't necessarily independent initially. They had the wire connecting them and everything, right? I mean, there's a lot involved here that admittedly justifies that price tag, but then you can't justify the product to the everyday person. And so I don't see this like really taking off, but they're trying. And I think I feel like Microsoft is looking to play a really, really long game. And they are trying to innovate, not so much in software anymore, but trying to innovate in hardware classes that already exist and then hopefully take over there and provide a lot of services with those hardware platforms with your Microsoft 365 account. This is not like, holy shit, I've never heard this before. I'm not saying this is any startling revelation. Not this last part of what I'm talking about. There's other parts within it, I think, that should be seen as such if you've never heard anybody talk about it before. Because I don't know any other tech show that's really like talking about the fact that all of these tech companies eventually just want to get you to where you interact with them. No smartphone, no computer, unless perhaps you're at work, which what does that even look like now these days? And you're just interacting with all of your entertainment, and yeah, there's got to be a way that you watch Netflix, right? Well, I'm sure there's a pair of glasses for that. But whatever, to where, yeah, you are mainly interacting with them and always interacting with them and doing everything through their servers, through their earbuds. Would that come through 5G connection? Yes, blah, blah, blah. And there it is. Now I've got some other stuff I want to get into in the foreplay here before we get into our main story and a very important HackSec and some other interesting news that we'll get into in the other segments of the show. I know the instant critique you're going to come up with, but Stallion, if people don't have a screen in front of them anymore, how are they going to interact on social media? Well, let me give you another quick prediction here. And that is that Silicon Valley has been aware of this for a very long time. And in fact, I think that Facebook buying Instagram ultimately was about Facebook realizing, and they knew content collapse was coming anyway. We talked about that and they've talked about it, and we've seen, leaked memos, company memos about the matter. And why they're getting into why suddenly Facebook is turning more into stories, right? And on Facebook proper, but then, or whatever they call them on there that are like Instagram stories and IGTV and all that. The reason they're jumping on board with all of that is because they do know that they want to get to this point where it's not about screens in front of you, or maybe it is a screen in front of you, but it's, a pane of glass that you can see through at some point, say the pane of glass that's the windshield on your car, on your quote unquote autonomous car, if that comes in the future, or it's the glasses that you wear or the contact lens you have over, in your eye or whatever that will show you all of this. And I think that's why a lot of investors also, who probably know about this, but just don't talk about it that much, why a lot of investors are still so hot on Twitter, because Twitter is it's not about the long form content on Twitter, right? Twitter is this weird amalgamation and hodgepodge that's all about the quick shot as far as, textual content. And I think they see that will somehow still be, like this public message board effectively will still be there, but it'll be something, that'll be off to the corner of your eye and on your glasses, or that you could, speak quickly, what you want to tweet out, on there. But again, it's a very, it's a micro, what do we say? The micro blogging platform, right? It's, or that's what they used to call themselves. It's all about that. And so Twitter still has some viability. So there's social media that still has places to go. I think that's why investors are also excited about TikTok and some others. Not to say that investors are intelligent people, because a lot of times they're not. They'll just put money on whatever it looks like it might pick up with the kids, and they have no idea what kids are actually into. And they're hoping that they can basically, kind of like Steve Jobs said, right? Where, we have to tell the consumer what they want. They don't know. And which is him and, basically everybody else in Silicon Valley thinking that we're all idiots, which they do. So, to say, what about, social media? Well, social media has already turned into, with Instagram, TikTok, and even Twitter being in the short form, is already a very quick visual medium. It is not a well thought out, it is not something that, where you take a lot of time and write out that, which to some degree, I'm just as glad, because if I had to read one more libertarian, 5-page screed in a Facebook post, I'd go shit myself. We don't need that. We need, yes, in-depth explanation is a great and wonderful thing. But the last thing I need to hear right now is about, property rights. Anyway, as if you understand what rights even are. But regardless of that, but let's move on. Something I noticed, speaking of, which is in reference to the fact that I was doing, a recent update and install with Windows, something that I've installed on Windows for a long time, almost as long as the product itself has existed. And I don't mean Windows, I mean the product, is CCleaner from Puriform. Now, CCleaner is great. It does a good registry clean, gets rid of a lot of temporary files, and just can often clean up a lot of disk space that previously Microsoft services have not done a very good job of, or it was very complicated to get Microsoft's built-in software to do it. Okay, to clean up a lot of those temporary files or old installation files and a lot of that other shit. Okay, CCleaner along with Revo Uninstaller used to be real secret weapons for making sure that my hard drive space was, optimal. I still install CCleaner. I think it still has use. I know that there are people who argue that, the registry cleaner, that's not needed anymore, because a lot of the leftovers of the registry, doesn't take up a lot of space on modern hard drives anyway, or, hard drives now where you get on the average computer, you get, I don't know, a terabyte, 512 gig, or a terabyte, or however much, storage space you have. That's, certainly I will often deal in computers that have a little 32 or 64 gig eMMC drive in them. And then all of that space really does matter. But, cleaning up the registry was more about having the operating system, having Windows run faster, because it wasn't confused looking for older DLLs or even file extension types that were no longer relevant, because I uninstalled the software that perhaps was taking advantage of a certain file extension type, right? So I still felt like CCleaner, did some good business, did something useful, okay, and it was worthwhile installing. So I was putting it in, it was version 5.62. And now, as we know, or I would hope Sovereign Tech listeners know, when you're installing any Windows software, you really need to pay attention to the checkboxes, and you need to pay attention to the install process, because there's a good bet that what you're trying to install is trying to install, I don't know, frankly, it could be malware, or it could be something and I would say this actually isn't benign. Maybe they want to install a web browser on you, and these companies do this because either the malware will make them money somehow, or including the software as a package, they got a deal from Google or whoever, okay, if you include this option in your install process, we'll give you X amount of dollars for doing so. And so that's why they do it. So when I was installing CCleaner, I noticed, and, I was unchecking all the boxes, I noticed something very strange, and it was pretty insipid. CCleaner, or Puriform, and let's be clear here, Puriform is owned by Avast. Yes, that Avast, that, has been selling off people's information for a long time. and got in a lot of trouble finally for it. Remember, just earlier this year in 2020, Avast and AVG, both of them got in trouble for doing exactly that. With even just their AV software, their antivirus software, they were selling your browsing history to third parties. Okay. Now, Avast has their own web browser that they've been operating for a couple of years now, at least, that is Chromium based. And there's other companies that do this. Komodo does this, which, I mean, we all know the nightmares around Komodo. Komodo at least offers one that is Chromium based and one that is Firefox based, or at least traditionally they had. But Avast has been based on Chromium or on Chrome. Well, I mean, that's the Chromium, engine, right? Blink and all that. And now CCleaner has basically gotten into the game. My guess is my initial guess was the reason they're doing this is because CCleaner does have a pretty good name, especially in the Windows space. Okay. This is their CCleaner browser, which they try to install on you. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Is also Chrome based. Okay. But it's only available for Windows, even though CCleaner is available on Android and Mac, and so on. But I think CCleaner's brand name, really, really resides on Windows machines. And I'm not saying that's unfair or that it shouldn't be, or, that they haven't earned it or deserve it. I think they do. I wouldn't be surprised if this started. Apparently, I thought that this was being done because, Avast got, egg on their face this year. And so now they're trying to still stay in the browser game, but do so by using the other brand they own, which is Piriform, which of course operates CCleaner. But then I found out apparently this has been available to install for some users for over a year, since at least January 2019. I've seen reports of this. Now I've installed, granted, I don't use a Windows machine all the time, but I've installed CCleaner a few times over the past year, I can recall. But I don't recall once seeing the CCleaner browser come out up until version 5.62, which I just recently installed. So I don't know what the rollout strategy here is. I wouldn't be surprised if they did go with a broader rollout, still under the auspices that I described, that basically nobody's touching Avast or AVG, with a 10-foot pole. But a lot of people probably don't know that CCleaner is owned by Avast. Okay. So now this browser, I've looked into it a bit. I sure as fuck didn't install it. Okay. But in fact, it's nasty the way they do it, because there's actually a box you have to check and one you have to uncheck to make sure that it doesn't get installed. There's one that's going to install it, and then there's one to make it default, and it's very confusing. And it's opt in to install it. And that's a problem, right? I mean, is that anything new for a lot of this type of software? No, but it's there. But I looked into it a bit. Now it's got a lot of nice features in name. In the abstract, it has a lot of nice features. It has ad blockers. It has anti-fingerprinting technology, kind of like what Firefox would use. Anti-phishing. I mean, it has a lot of these really great sounding security features. Here's the rub. I can't find anywhere, and even in their privacy policy and so on, and nowhere in their settings, which, let's understand that Chromium is an open source engine. That's why, or browser. That's why all of these, name brand browsers are based on that, because, they get to use that for free, right? And without having to pay any real licensing fees or anything along those lines. But I can't find where, other than I know the ad blocker is AdBlock Plus, which it should be uBlock Origin, but fine. Okay. I can't find what tech they're using to anonymize your browsing or to, do the anti-fingerprinting and all this other stuff. And nowhere does it say, their privacy policy for the CCleaner browser is the same privacy policy as Avast, which, what good has that privacy policy done for you? They're selling your browsing data willy-nilly. So don't touch this thing. Okay. Is the ultimate end of the story. But do they really, really think that, I mean, they have to literally trick you into using this web browser, which is reason enough to not, right? Because if they feel like they have to trick you, obviously, they don't trust their own product enough, and they don't trust you enough to want to do what's best for you. And I mean, installing it wouldn't be anyway, but you get my point. I don't get where these companies come from, where they think that somehow, like, really, do they think that they are somehow going to get some kind of market share in the browsing space? Or the alternative, I mean, because, all right, let's talk about that for a second, then we'll go a little further. I mean, when you think of even a company with the brand recognition, the people that fucking create the, own and operate the operating system itself, that being Microsoft with Windows, Microsoft can't even get a sizable market share of people using Edge, which, to be fair, and I'm just being fair, okay, I'm not saying this is a good idea, even though I do have arguments around, the less software you install, the better. Basically, if you install Windows, should you use Edge? It's not a horrible idea from a certain security standpoint, because that's one less attack vector that you haven't installed by installing other software. Sure as fuck the CCleaner browser. Okay. If Edge can't get because look, the Credge, right? The Chromium based Edge, it's actually a pretty damn good browser. Like, I'm going to give it credit. It works really well for what it is. Okay. That's what I'm saying. To be fair, if you can't even get people to use that, why the fuck does Piriform/Avast think that people are going to bother with CCleaner or use the CCleaner browser at any point? Unless maybe they just think, here's the two possibilities. One is that they think, but this doesn't make sense, is that CCleaner, people will install CCleaner, right? Because they'll get, a recommendation from a friend or someone there or whatever. And those that don't already know to install CCleaner will just install CCleaner and hopefully won't even realize that their web browser changed, because perhaps they're already using Google Chrome and the CCleaner browser looks a lot like Chrome. And since it automatically installs and will open up and ask to make sure that something's default, maybe they're just hoping people are stupid enough that they'll go through the process, it'll run, and they won't even realize that they switched to another browser. Maybe that's their hope. Okay. But at the same time, like, you have to recommend people to use CCleaner, which granted I have in the past. But like, the average person isn't going to install CCleaner in the first place. You kind of have to be, for lack of a better way of phrasing it, okay, I'm putting this in quotes, you kind of have to be intelligent to install CCleaner in the first place. Unless it's just something you've been doing for years back when, I don't know. That doesn't make any sense. The other possibility here, in which I think is the most likely as to why they are even bothering and wasting the time, is that browsing data, it is worth the time, effort, and risk of tricking people into using this web browser. Because the browsing data that they collect from you is worth that much money. Now, what should bother you about that is that that's money of you, what you're just doing on the internet, browsing the web, that you're not making and that another company is making off of you. Why can't you make that fucking money? Why can't you have the option? No, that's fine. I'll sell my data, right? And in turn, you get the money for it, but you get rid of the middleman like Piriform or Avast. That should bother the fuck out of you, that just your everyday processes that you go through on the web make so much money for people and you're not getting a dime of that. And what are you getting? A half-assed web browser in payment? That's horseshit. So don't install this. And in fact, if we needed recommendation now, don't install CCleaner again. I mean, if you're already using it and you've avoided, I mean, the problem is that this was even during an update process. So there's no real way, we can't say, well, I already have it installed. I'll make sure that, that I never install the CCleaner browser. Yeah, but even in the update process, they're changing how it happens. Point being, use BleachBit. Okay, if you're still using Windows, you haven't jumped away from that. If you're using Linux, you don't really need anything like CCleaner. Not exactly. But if you're using Windows still, just use BleachBit. Okay, if I think of it, I'll put the link in the show notes for that, but you can find it. Do that. And that way you're getting the same, more or less the same feature set as CCleaner, and you're not going to have to worry about that process. And BleachBit's, open source and all that, and just fantastic. I mean, I've been displeased with CCleaner for a long time anyway, so this is just nail in the coffin, for me, and I'm certainly not going to bother even recommending. And, like I've used it on Android too. And I think actually, funny thing, I think I might have actually recommended CCleaner or talked about it briefly in my Dark Android book, which I just found out. My Dark Android book is actually featured by bookauthority.org, who schleps out the Forbes and some other news sources and all this. My book is listed as one of the top, in the top 100. I think there's like 91 or whatever, but it's in one of the top 100 smartphone ebooks of all time. Like, that's literally the name of the story: best smartphone ebooks of all time. And I'm actually number 19 in that. Now, you can self-report some into those lists, but mine is not one that's self-reported. Mine just showed up, I'm guessing, because of, they're not great Amazon sales whatsoever, but certainly it sells better than others. And quite frankly, when you go through that list, you're going to realize, holy shit, he really did write the only guide to, to security and privacy on Android. I need to update that. But anyway, in that book, I think I mentioned CCleaner, but then I said, hey, use SD-made anyway. Don't bother with CCleaner. Don't bother with CCleaner. Stick with SD-made on Android if you want that sort of thing there. But regardless, CCleaner browser, really, really insidious, the install process on this. It's just, and it's also adding more, well, I don't want to use that term. It's adding more reasons. Let's just say that. It's adding more reasons to why you should get away from Windows anyway, because these companies with software that even is supposedly free are getting just more and more cutthroat with their options and with just the install process. They are getting fucking cutthroat. It's bad, and could it eventually get to Linux if Linux takes off more? Yeah, there might be something along those lines, but I think once you get into, especially if you start now, if you've never used Linux before, if you get into what we could almost call the Linux mindset of how to install software and how to go through with all that, this sort of thing can't happen to you. And as far as the rest of the world, well, this stuff's going to go the way of the dodo anyway, right? Because it's all going to become spatial computing. Ooh, it's just everywhere around me. I don't even want to know what an XE is. It's spatial computing. Oh, God damn it. Anyway, let's move on. Speaking of my Dark Android book, something that I also recommend in there, a nice little piece of software in that I have talked about and recommended for years on this show, is on Android, and it's only on Android, though you can get it outside of the Google Play Store if you need to with F-Droid, or I think you can even independently install the APK. But it's a messaging app, but really it's a lot more, but it's a messaging app called Briar. Now, I've talked about this many times, and considering we're not going to be able to get into this here. Again, these are the news stories. What can you get into? What can't you? Or what do you have time for? What don't you? And I've already taken way more time than I expected on talking about all this stuff in the Foreplay. So I want to be quick here and wrap up these recommendations. But Briar, I was going to say Signal. We're not going to be able to talk about Signal's new PIN system, but people have concerns around that, and I think some of those concerns are founded. We'll talk about that in a future episode, most likely, as this takes shape more. But maybe you want to get away from Signal. Maybe you don't trust Telegram with some of your more sensitive materials. I'll tell you, a platform that I was really excited about, but I figured could not become really practical, was Briar. And it really is a platform because it allows you to do groups. It allows you to do private messaging. It allows you to do blogging even on it. There's a lot of features there, and it could really go a lot further. It is a messaging app, again, only Android, that operates almost totally through Tor, but not only that, it allows you to communicate without an internet connection. We talked about Briar when I did my first episode about COVID-19 that was based around a listener question that I got. I talked about Briar as being a great option for when you are, more localized, right? And you're not dealing with people, say, thousands of miles away. that it's a great option because it can take advantage of Bluetooth, even though Bluetooth, oh boy. There's a conversation to be had there around the security around Bluetooth, though granted, Bluetooth security, I think, still stands up a little taller than Wi-Fi as far as security goes. But anyway, we have to save that conversation as well. But it allows you through different radios that your smartphone has, and they are many, but through different radios that it has and that it's programmed for, it allows for communication without a connection to your telco, without, a data connection, okay, to an ISP or anything like that. So without the internet, all right, it lets you just talk device to device. We're going to get into that perhaps a little bit more during HackSec. We'll see. We might not be able to have time to get into that because Riot is implementing something, not the riots that are going on, but Riot as in the peer-to-peer messenger is doing, I just let the cat out of the bag. Riot, which is also a messaging platform, kind of like the modern day IRC, really, also is looking to go peer-to-peer as well. We might be able to get into that a little later, but we'll see what we have as far as time. So with Briar, okay, part of the problem, or what's been a hang up for Briar, I don't see it as a problem. I see it as a good thing because ultimately anything you're doing online should really lead to, having a peer group nearby, okay, close to you. Like that's the ultimate end of any kind of communication on the internet, in my opinion, outside of, just basic market transactions, if we want to call it that. Okay. So Briar has what some consider a problem. Like I said, I consider it a feature where the way to exchange keys and to be able to communicate with somebody on it is that you have to scan each other's keys in meet space. Okay. You've got to have the person right in front of you, or, again, you could do it over like, say, a video call potentially, but then that's not creating a secure handshake between the keys because whoever is providing the video, like if you did it over Skype or something like that, well, there's, they would effectively have record of that key exchange. Okay. And that's a problem. So you don't want to do it that way. But as of version 1.2 of Briar, and I didn't know about this, but it's fairly recent development. As of version 1.2, there is now a way where you can generate a link that you can send to somebody that will allow you to add them to your contact list in Briar. Which, I guess I don't mind it because it's optional. You don't have to connect with people that way if you don't want to, and you can still use Briar in the more in-person key exchange way that I love about it. But I could see where there's an advantage here. And if you're looking to get away from Signal because you're concerned around cloud storage or other matters that have to do with the PIN system or maybe a direction that they're going, which, by the way, real quick, I warned you a long time ago, okay, about how Moxie Marlinspike wants to get away from Signal being so federated. And I said, that's a bad idea. But that's the direction that he wants to go. So anyway, so if you're looking for that hyper secure or that far more secure platform, maybe more than Telegram or something like that, Briar, again, it's only on Android, okay, is certainly a place to look, in my opinion. And look a little deeper on it, but now it is something where you can communicate with people more remotely. Briar's main flaw now, and actually Riot runs into the same issue, is that it's a bit of a resource hog, and so it can drain your battery pretty hard. So that's something to keep in mind. But I think that Briar has now become, there are options now for Briar, especially like with group functionality and some other things. I'm very intrigued by this. So anyway, just letting you know that's happening. Speaking of other, as far as encryption, encrypted communications goes, there has been a breakdown by the people at APK Mirror about Android Messenger. Yeah, it's just Android Messenger, right? Which is the default SMS client for Android. Google, with their new RCS protocol, which they've rolled out widely over the past year, they are looking to make text messages end-to-end encrypted. Now, this is entirely possible to do. I mean, it really is, because, well, speaking of Signal, back when Signal used to be two products, remember it used to be, I think it was Red Phone and it was Text Secure. Red Phone was your, secure call app. And then Text Secure was basically a way of using SMS to send encrypted texts. And it did it. And it worked for a while until they switched over to data messaging and they turned it all into one app and whatever, and which was fine. But, until they did that. So this is possible for them to do in the right way. We don't have all the details on what the encryption is going to look like and everything, but I do think that that's very interesting that really Android Messenger is just going to turn into what it's been trying to be for a while, an iMessage competitor. That's really what they're looking at here. So we'll be keeping an eye on that development. And, I'll certainly let you know more as they do it. But I mean, yeah, it's totally possible to do end-to-end encryption over SMS. Because again, it's been done before, by Text Secure or by, Open Whisper Systems or what is now the Signal Foundation, years ago. So looking for, well, again, we'll see what happens with that there, because Google had to force, I mean, I don't know how that's going to take shape or if there's going to be some kind of legislation around it when it happens. And I say that because I don't know what kind of trouble Google got into when they basically forced the RCS protocol, onto Android, because initially they were waiting for telcos, for Verizon and whoever else to implement it. And they were just taking too long. And so basically Google just circumvented all of them and just, said, well, we control the texting app anyway, so we're just going to turn it on, and they just did it. But I wonder if the end-to-end encryption part of this is going to become a point of contention with the telcos. But anyway, we'll see. But I think that'll wrap it up for the Foreplay. I'll be right back with more. You're listening to Sovryn Tech. Hey, is Sovryn Tech not enough for you? Well, let me tell you about something you'll never get enough of. No, I mean it. We're talking about a radio show and podcast that goes all night long, 7 nights a week, 3 hours a night, 365 days a year, and has been going since the early aughts, baby. I am talking about none other than Free Talk Live. It's the show you control. That's right. It's an open phones call-in show that is ready for you. And if you're worried that your voice isn't going to get heard, don't be. We are talking about the only libertarian radio show stateside. And not only that, it's also the number 26 talk show in the United States. Start listening now and go ahead and hit that massive back catalog at freetalklive.com. The Golden Stallion guarantees a good time, and you might even find some episodes with me on them when you do. That's freetalklive.com, and we thank them for sponsoring Sovryn Tech. Let's get back to the show.
The main story.
It is time for the main story, where maybe we can take a little bit of a break from outrage. Of course, that depends on how you feel about this. Like I said at the top of the show, we have a conversation really to have about podcasting. Now, the impetus for this is due to a deal, an announcement that has quite literally shaken the podcasting world. That deal being that Spotify has done a deal, and we don't have all the details on how much this deal is for, what kind of multi-year deal it is, anything like that, we don't know. But they are going to get exclusivity to the Joe Rogan Experience, which is probably the biggest podcast in the world. I would argue not rightfully so, because I don't think Joe Rogan is that intelligent. He has great guests on often enough who many times are very intelligent, not all, but many times are very intelligent. But, it's not like it's him being interesting on his show. It's his guests being interesting on his show, right? As to where I think the mark of a truly great podcast is when it's, a set group of people, or maybe it's one person, not tooting my own horn here at all. And I mean that. But where it's a set, mind or minds presenting you with information every week. I mean, I do guests on the show, and I'm happy to do them. I would never make that a mainstay feature. I don't mean guests. I mean like interviews. Okay. I have done interviews. Guests, like if Ellen wants to come on, she could come on every week and that's fine. But then that's very different than from what Joe Rogan does, right? Point being is that I want the person behind the mic to be fucking brilliant or entertaining. And Joe Rogan is neither. Some of his guests are, but he is not. And so I don't feel like his show is worthy. And I've said this for years. This isn't me saying anything new, okay, or any jealousy around his podcast deal, all right? But bottom line is just that I don't think his show deserves the veneration that it has. He sure as fuck isn't as good as Howard Stern, right? Which is somebody who also has guests, but then Howard Stern is really the entertaining person and really the interesting person. You're going to hear Howard. You're not going to hear his guests. But the deal is similar into how Howard Stern, signed exclusivity like with SiriusXM years ago. Of course, that was a really, really major deal, again, in the same vein. But something that I've talked about over the years on this show is that, and we thought maybe Apple was going to try for it. Like, I think if Apple bought Joe Rogan, I don't think that would have shocked anybody. I think Spotify doing it is what surprised the fuck out of people. Okay. Now, does this make sense for Spotify to want to do? Granted, they've been ramping up their podcast feature set for the past couple of years. I mean, even this show is on Spotify. It's not exclusive to Spotify, but now Joe Rogan is going to be. It's not, I mean, considering what we were talking about earlier with the Surface earbuds and the purpose of AirPods, the ultimate end game of those kinds of devices, those audio devices, Spotify is in a great position to be a major part of the future where you largely interact via, a speaker in your ear with a microphone attached. Okay. So, this is, would investors say, because you got to imagine this was a multi-million dollar deal for Joe Rogan to be willing to do this. I mean, who knows what that number is, but it's got to be through the roof. Why would investors go with that? Because if I were an investor, I would instantly say, well, he's already on your platform. He's already on Spotify. Why do we have to buy him for exclusivity? What sense does that make? So people have to use the Spotify app for podcasting? It's like, I don't think that's reason enough because they can already use it. It wouldn't make sense for an investor unless you told them that, well, in the future, people aren't going to really have so much choice in podcast apps because we're going to force apps on them through their earbuds. Okay, then suddenly an investor says, aha, all right, then we better get the most compelling content that we possibly can onto our platform, right? And in this case, Spotify. Now, I think for a while, people really did expect Apple was going to do this, and they seem to have doubled down by separating podcasts and turning it into a separate app on iOS and macOS away from iTunes, that they were really doubling down and starting to get serious about podcasting. And they have not over the years since we thought that they were going to do that. It's a totally missed opportunity on their part because they are still ultimately, despite this deal, and it doesn't start until September, Apple is still ultimately the dominant player, pun intended, still the dominant player in podcasting. Whether or not this move by Spotify is going to inspire Apple or any other platform, Google Podcasts, whatever, to start doing exclusivity deals with podcasts, I can't say for certain. I would imagine that it would get them interested in it. I mean, the other company that's dropped the ball on this is Amazon, because Audible has had podcasts and they've done exclusivity deals and where they've sold podcast episodes over their platform in the past, like with Susie Bright and some others. But they never got serious enough, I think, with that, but they really could have. And I think that was a severely missed opportunity on their part, but maybe they'll pick up on that again, depending upon, I'm sure the industry overall is waiting with bated breath. how many people, how many new Spotify installs are there going to be between now and, say, the end of the year, between now and September, when this news gets out and ultimately when it happens in September and so on. And if it is a significant amount of people, because those motherfuckers have just got to listen to Joe Rogan for some fucking reason that goes well beyond my mind. I mean, I've listened to episodes. I get it. Like, oh, that's good. They did a great interview with John Carmack. That's nice. And so on. I don't know. Maybe this will inspire people. I'm not sure, or inspire other companies to take this seriously. But now podcasting, something to understand is that podcasting, in my opinion, is not just because of the earbud future, okay, if we want to call it that we were describing earlier, but podcasting is very much the future of entertainment in a lot of ways. I think even Netflix ultimately isn't really safe. There's a lot of different ways that I think that this could go, but people being on the go, people always having a speaker in their ear, and that being like the way that they interact with the world and blah, blah, blah. Podcasting is just going to become more and more prevalent and popular. Okay. And believe it or not, I mean, people who listen to podcasts can't believe that there are other people that don't, and I know that. But there are a lot. Most people don't listen to podcasts. But I think that is going to dramatically change in the future. And not in the far-flung future either. Okay. So podcasts are, I would say, really the future of entertainment, because it is an entertainment that allows you to be on the go and do things at the same time, or, it allows you to play. I mean, some people, and I know a lot of people do, I do this sometimes. I'll listen to a podcast while I'm playing a video game and so on. It allows you to multitask, and there's just so much shit to do. And you feel like there's just so much you have to keep abreast on. There's so much that you have to keep up to date on, and blah, 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 that, people, to fit everything in, I think people feel the need to multitask at all fucking times. And I understand, believe me, I often feel that need as well. And it's something that I've really had to come to terms with, is that to be a mentally cogent, physically healthy, and so on human being, okay, to be a healthy human being, I need to do less, not more. Now, that's a big conversation to have. If you want to ask me about it, you can, and I'll talk about it at some point. But, and I don't like it. I mean, here's the thing. All right. So I guess this is kind of a side tangent to get on, but let's talk about it. Okay. Here's the thing with this, or with this idea of doing less, is that, so many of the things that I have been into, like, I haven't really dropped a lot of shit that I'm into, because, I didn't make I'll just say it because I don't care, because I'm not on a multi-year deal. All right. Like Joe Rogan is or something. And in fact, I mean, let's be clear here about this. Let me make this point abundantly clear about, and then we can talk about this more. Okay. With podcasting, part of the advantage of being a podcaster, like we talked about at the top of the show, is that you don't have to be beholden to advertisers if you don't want to be. You don't have to be beholden to platforms if you don't want to be. The problem is that Joe Rogan has just become beholden to Spotify. And there is the chance, unless he put it in his contract, there is the chance that he could talk about something that is just fucking anathema to Spotify. What if he starts talking about how, well, shit, I think Bluetooth headphones are unhealthy, which there is pretty good evidence for. Spotify is going to pull the fucking plug on him. He can't talk about the truth if that ends up being a truth. Do you get my point? As soon as you start making deals like this, as soon as podcasters start making deals like this, their lips are, on certain subjects, sealed. Granted, to some degree, if you buy into social pressures and like you have to have such and so many numbers every week for your show to make you feel good about your fucking self because you don't feel good about yourself intrinsically, you are going to be very careful about some of the things that you say anyway, right? Like Joe Rogan has to walk a very fine line. This is part of the reason I also think that his podcast is shit, because he has to walk a fine line of not, to have as many listeners as he does, you can't get into root striking subjects. And look, you just can't. Not really, because you're going to, or maybe you can let some of your hosts do it, some of your interviews or guests do it, but you as the host can't take a stand, because you're going to piss off your liberal crowd or you're going to piss off your conservative crowd. Me, I don't worry about that. This show stands so far and fucking above and beyond the concepts of liberal or conservative. Fuck all of that shit. And fuck identifying with it. But at the same time, I know that my audience is, going to be limited to, I'd love it if I get more than 20,000. Right now I hover at around 20,000 listeners a week. Okay. I'd love if I could get beyond that, but then I also kind of anticipate that I may never do that. Now, granted, those people are incredibly passionate about this show, and that can mean more to, let's say, if we were worried about making money and advertisers and things like this, fine. All right. But I think that the real future of being able to have root striking, truthful entertainment and educational and informational content is that you've got to get away from the money behind the thing. Let people make donations if they want. If an advertiser reaches out to you, fine, but you make it explicitly clear that you will not be fucking beholden to their dollar with your mouth. You cannot care about the money. The instant you care about the money, truth goes out the window. You understand? And that is a big problem with this concept of exclusivity deals with podcasting. And that's one of the main points or it might even be the main point that I wanted to bring up with talking about this deal with Joe Rogan, is that this is ultimately hurting a medium that was free from all the bullshit that other mediums like movies and even radio and, and TV and everything else that because they were all beholden to the networks, the executives, the advertisers, the whoever got so outraged that they had to call up, the boss, whatever. Podcasting was beyond all of that. And now we are reverting to where that is no longer true. And that is a problem. We're reverting to podcasting is starting to enter that category of, as far as popularity, I saw it going, meeting the popularity of movies and so on anyway. But now it's not just taking on the positives of being popular, it's taking on the negatives as well. Because now you are going to be beholden to contracts with your platform, the distributor of the fucking show. The beauty of podcasting, again, was that it was federated. As long as I have the feed, I can put it in whatever app that I wanted, right? That is changing, and that's unfortunate. This is the importance of having a donation model if you want to make money off of your podcast or fund it. And as compared to it's reliant upon how much content you get out there, what you say in the content, and blah, 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 blah. You're always beholden to what you say, because if you piss somebody off, they're not going to donate to you. But, you gotta be willing to, for lack of a better phrase, stick to your guns and hold to your truths, right? Or what you see as truths. So now the point I was going to get to earlier, okay, because I do want to talk about this for a minute. I haven't given up much in my life growing up. Like the things that I was into when I was like 8, I dare say 90% of that I'm still into. I can't even think of a movie that I watched when I was that age, or I can think of one movie that I watched when I was that age that I don't like now, that being The Dirt Bike Kid. I thought that movie was fucking amazing when I was a little kid, but when I became a teenager, I watched it again with my best friend at the time, and we both loved the movie, and so we're like, okay, we're gonna watch it. I found the VHS with it on it. We're gonna watch it, and the movie was fucking horrible. It was so bad. But otherwise, most of the movies that I think of that I watched from back then, granted, I was lucky in that my parents didn't treat me that I was infantile. And they let me watch grown-up shit, like shit that was also made for grown-ups. And so it still holds up today because it wasn't meant for, it's not VeggieTales, right? It's not, it was stuff that was suitable for grownups as well. And so, you can grow up with it and appreciate it more as you get older. I do have to appreciate, or I do have to, I guess, respect. I don't have to, but I do respect my dad, for getting me into things that wasn't necessarily meant for kids. I mean, it wasn't graphic either, but it wasn't meant for kids. And it was something that allowed me that inspired me to mature, but also that I got to mature with. So I haven't given up on a lot of stuff. I mean, even things that weren't that mature necessarily, right? Like I'll still watch 80s Voltron all day long, or Thundercats. Fuck yeah. I mean, I still dig Power Rangers. I mean, you can go Star Wars, Star Trek, all these things. I'm still into all of them. Still playing video games. We got a great gaming grid we're going to get into here in a minute, or in a little bit. So many things I'm still into. Here's the thing: is that at the time growing up in the 80s and 90s, the amount of this stuff and the venues that these things took advantage of was very limited, right? Voltron, for example, was a cartoon. Yeah, you had toys. Okay. But I mean, toys don't have to take your attention. And maybe they had little books here and there, but it was, a book here and there, or maybe there was a limited comic series or something. It wasn't a multimedia, fiasco. I want to say fiasco. It shouldn't be a fiasco, but it wasn't like this multimedia, bombardment upon your every sense. Now, I don't mind things being multimedia. Okay. I mean, I could actually with Star Wars, for example. I loved it when Shadows of the Empire came out in the 90s, and it had a making book, it had a video game, it had the novel, it had the comic, it had the sequel comic, it had the soundtrack by Joel McNeely, it had the whole thing. I thought that was awesome. Like, that was really, really cool, But, actually Star Wars is a great example to bring up here. Like, here's the thing, is that to be into all of the things that, I never stopped being into. I mean, we've had conversations on TIE Fighter Renegades, the other show I do with my man Rob, where we've talked about how we feel a lot of modern entertainment and all that. But none of this stuff required so much of my time. I could be into, say, even in the 90s, I could be into every science fiction show at the time. I could be into Stargate. I could be into Babylon 5. I could be into Sequest. I could be into Superforce. I could be into, My Secret Identity. I could be, go down the list of it. And you could say, well, that's a lot of television to watch. Yeah, but not really. Ultimately, compared to how much people watch on fucking Netflix, give me a goddamn break, asshole. Anyway, you could be into all of it because there wasn't that much, and it didn't require you to get the entire story. You didn't have to go all over the place. Now, I know this is going to sound ironic to some people, but I'm telling you that I had a realization as late. Because I defend usually the idea of, yeah, okay, with Star Wars, let's have comic books. Let's have, video games. Let's have movies and TV shows and YouTube shorts and whatever else that all create one giant universe that's all interconnected. And if you watch it all, you're going to get the broader story and it's all going to be amazing. Now, granted, Lucasfilm / Disney has completely failed on that end of things. Okay, to where they have not delivered that experience, even though they're delivering all that content. But here's the thing, is that every company is so, and this is what we call the attention wars on this show, right? Every company, and this goes well beyond entertainment, every company is so dying to have every fucking second that they can get of your attention, that they are just bombarding you with more and more shit. And in the entertainment industry, Hollywood is resurrecting every fucking franchise, even things that weren't a franchise, that they can, to try and hook you in. No, buy this, now buy this, now buy this, now buy this. I mean, and they just keep hammering you with it nonstop. I mean, fuck, they're going to make a Labyrinth 2. Are you kidding me? David Bowie is gone, baby. Leave the classics alone, for fuck's sake. but and they know what they're doing. They know that either it's your nostalgia or your interest or your passion or whatever, and those are separate things, or whatever it happens to be. They're like, yeah, we got to get them. We got to get the ass and seats. We got to get the ass and seats. We got to get the clicks. We got to get them. And it's just, and it'll run you absolutely ragged. But nothing is just a TV show anymore. Nothing is just a comic book anymore. Nothing is just a book anymore. For the love of shit, I would be amazed if somebody just wrote a book and said, I will never do a sequel, and they never did a sequel, right? Everything's a franchise now. It's all connected, man. And you have no time for your own fucking thoughts if you are into this stuff. And that's the problem. I mean, I recognize that this is something that might be a rarer case to me and might not apply to you at all. But I think that my abstract point will apply to you. Okay. And that is, we got to, all right, hold on. Before I go that distance, the point I was going to make earlier in relation to this is that I was, and that I stopped myself from saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. I was fortunate enough that I could still enjoy, the latest movie, the latest book, the latest comic, the latest TV show, the latest video game, and all this. I could enjoy these things because I was fortunate, I'm just going to say it. I was fortunate enough to not fall into the trap of having children at the age of 20. To where I still had free time to engage in enjoying the arts. Now, one could argue that a lot of this stuff has always been about making money. Sure. I get that. Okay. I understand. We got lucky with some things that got come out that had come out. Not anymore, but at the time, like in the 80s and 90s, because people were just trying to recreate that Star Wars magic and they didn't know how it was created in the first place. So they gave some really intelligent people an opportunity. Well, okay. Yeah. All right. Well, we don't know what you're saying, but it sounds like space wizards and fight scenes. So fine, go ahead and make it. And then we end up with, brilliant fucking shows somehow, like Babylon 5, right? Or, go down the list of them. But we got lucky because the execs weren't paying attention, right? As to where now they pay attention, or they think they're paying attention because they get social media metrics, which are all bullshit anyway, but they think that somehow those have some kind of meaning. But anyway, I was able to keep up with a lot of this stuff because I had ultimate control of my time for most of my life. But now it's to the point that to be into any of these things, and I know that I've felt differently in the past, but again, companies fucked it up. So I'm not going to defend them with this anymore. Now there's just so much shit that you've got to be into with any of this stuff. You can't be into all of them. And again, you kind of have to be my age to, I guess, to where you could actually have association, mental association of heart, perhaps with, some of these, say, franchises or whatever else or anything or things that are out there. Okay. But there's just too much. And even if you're somebody, I still don't have kids. I still ultimately have, control of my time in many ways. Okay. I have the most beautiful relationship I've ever had in my life with the most amazing woman, but like to actually live life, you can't engage in all of it. You can't take all of it on. And you've got to learn to do less. Like, you know what? Maybe you need to give up video games. I'm not saying you need to or you should or whatever. You take your pick of which one. But we can't possibly do all the things that what counts for the market today is pushing on us. We can't. We don't have time. We used to, because there used to not be so much. Right? You used to be able to, there was a time where you could basically see every movie that came out in a year, and it didn't actually take a whole lot of your time. There was a time where you could keep up with a lot of the shows that everybody else was watching because you only had so many networks, right? You had 5 instead of 5,000. There was a time where, you could, and I'm not saying that was somehow a better world. Don't misconstrue what I'm saying. I am just saying that today, You can't be into everything. And you have to, this is a time, we live in a time where it is so important for you to be yourself and to know what you are genuinely into. Because if you are merely into just being into things that allow you to connect with other people, you are going to be like sands at the shore. You are sands at the edge of the ocean, and you are just getting whipped back and forth all over the place, and you're not even a person because you have no idea who you actually are. You're just riding. You're just being taken. You're not riding it. You're taking the tide. You're letting the tide just take you. It's horrible. We can't do all these things. We can't be into all these things like we used to be. It's just not possible. And now, I mean, because now all this shit is so engaging to the point that it's constantly taking your attention away. To be a healthy human being, we've got to do less. And it drives me nuts that I see, I mean, there's so many stories where I listen to all the talk about podcasters. I'll listen to Ben Greenfield. I'm sure he's going to get an exclusivity deal at some point. And like, I listen to everything they do in a day, and I'm just like, well, wait, where do you live? Like, at what point in this day? Well, when do you fuck? When do you get freaky for hours on end that supposedly this is allowing you to do so? If you're just, I'm just baffled. And all these people, oh, you need to do this at 6:05, then do this at 6:10, then, oh, and you better be up at 4 a.m. and you got to do this, and you got to, shut up. The hell I do. I'm so busy worried, am I getting this in? Am I doing this? Am I doing this? Am I doing this? Am I doing this? That I'm not living. And say nothing of the fact of the situation that we're in right now where, you can't even close the door on your job anymore. Oh, yeah, Sally, what do you mean you don't feel well? You don't have to come into the office, Sally. You can do it right from home. And somebody thinks that that's a great thing? The fuck it is. You're intruding on my little fortress, you son of a bitch. We have to learn to do less. It's a great book, actually from like 30 years ago, maybe even older, called Voluntary Simplicity. Check it out. Give that baby a read. And just, I'm not going to tell you that it's right or wrong or whatever. Just give it a read. And if you want, you can tell me how it speaks to you. But we are inundated with so much fucking crap. For sure, Spotify is not going to make it any better. We are inundated with so much fucking crap. And we're so concerned with trying to be on top of everything so that we can have that water cooler conversation, whether it's drinking on, in front of your webcam on Zoom, pathetic, or it's, I don't know what the fuck you're doing or how you're doing it. Wearing a mask or not, I don't know. Stop. You should be spending more time in your own head, processing your own thoughts or creating new neural connections. And I don't mean with some dumbass comedian on Netflix or on Spotify. Do you know, I was going to actually talk about this in the climax because, we're in crazy times right now. And I don't give a shit if that's cliche to say. Okay. Because we fucking are. It's insane what's going on. The riots, COVID-19, all of it. I mean, it's just, ultimately, in my opinion, it's just kind of a new thing for Americans. This kind of stuff happens all over the world all the time. But for Americans, this is something very new. Or fairly new. I know about Detroit, back when, and Spanish flu. Do you want to know what a really, really revolutionary act is right now? I don't want to use that term, but you want to know what a really revolutionary act is right now? A revolutionary act is being a peaceful person, picking up a book, and I mean a long form book, and baby, the older the better, and just reading it and not playing into, just the news porn that's going on right now around so much. Developing yourself, working on yourself, working on your intrinsic motivations, not what's going to get you laid by lying for a little while to somebody else about what you're into so that you can get them in the sack. Not that kind of horseshit. No. You being you. You being the best you. You being the top you. You being in shipshape, baby. That's a revolutionary act. That's something that the system hates. They hate it when you don't buy into their crap. They hate it when you don't pay attention to them. And that goes for the system, top to bottom, baby. From the government to the entertainment industry, to the news, to social media companies, to Microsoft and your, the operating system, to the computer manufacturer, all of them. They hate it when you don't give them attention. So stop. Because really, let's call this straight. Really, you tell me what putting a hashtag and a black picture on your social media feed does for anybody. No. That doesn't give visibility to shit. Don't tell me that. What you think people don't know what's going on? You can't avoid it when it's something big enough. I mean, that's advice people have given forever. They've always said that, look, if it's really important news, and this is long before COVID-19 or riots or anything else, if it was really important news, you can't avoid it. You're going to hear about it. Right. So you're not giving visibility. Are you giving support? Kiss my ass. Half the people that I see, and I took a look, because when you hear about this sort of thing, right? I mean, I'm a journalist. I'm a tech journalist. So I look into it. I don't pray, but I pray that you never have to be a journalist of any kind or work in PR because, it'll just drive you mad. Maybe that's what happened to me. But I look and I see the people that are putting up the black photo and I just want to be like, shut up. You're not you are supportive of the status quo. Your mind hasn't changed for jack shit. If you really cared, maybe you'd actually get out there, maybe you'd actually like be, I don't know, like, come on, Rock. You want to put up a black photo? How about you get in the front lines? It's just people, it's marketing. That's all that is. Hashtags, any movement, let me give you a truth here. Any movement that suddenly has like a hashtag, give me a break. You don't have to pay attention to the hashtag, I grant you. But like that's when you know, okay, well, this has been co-opted. Right. Existing outside of, above and beyond all these things is to the best of your ability, which comes down to you being the best possible person that you can be, the healthiest, the smartest, go down the list of it. It's all varying degrees for people. I'm very understanding and empathetic and respectful of that. I understand. Okay. But being the best fucking you, being intrinsically motivated, being you from the inside out. Not what they tell you is popular, not what they tell you should be, not what they tell you should do. Even if you want to help out with what's going on with the riots, go online and from the people that have been genuinely affected by it, you're going to get 20 different answers of what you should be doing. Should I shut up? Should I say something? Should I shut up? Should I say something? And no matter what you do, it's like you can't be, nothing's right. That doesn't mean don't do anything, but let me tell you the one thing that you absolutely can do right now, no matter what, in any situation that you find yourself in, from COVID-19 to riots to wherever you are in the world, is you be the best fucking you that you can be. And you exist outside of the system as much as is possible. And you are not reliant upon the system as much as is possible. That's how you get freedom. That's how you actually solve things. That's how you even have the wherewithal to solve things. I could go on forever about this. Let me just assure you that buying a $200 pair of earbuds does not make you a better person. Updating to the latest operating system version ultimately doesn't make you a better person. Reading Twitter doesn't make you a better person. Posting hashtags and pictures on Instagram doesn't make you a better person. I put the challenge to you that 90% of what you probably do in your day doesn't make you a better person. Now, I mean, I know I have a great audience, and I don't mean to insult anyone here or anything like that. And like I have said, I mean, all of this is coming out of recognizing within myself that I am not doing, that I feel that I am distracted from being the best Brian Sovryn that I can be, the happiest. And being the best leads to, that's what it's all about, is being the happiest, being the freest. Does that mean you can't be, kick back, be a little lazy and enjoy things, here and no, of course you can. That's part of the happiness. Take a good look. Just take a good look. If you think you're looking around, the world's going crazy right now, make sure you're not. And I'm going to leave it at that. And this kind of messaging can only happen, it can really, really only happen on podcasting, baby. It can't even happen on YouTube. So I am both intrigued and concerned about the future of podcasting. If now suddenly people are just looking to get multi-year deals with platforms, and we also lose the openness of the platform or of the concept of podcasting itself, not good. This is, Joe Rogan made a ton of money. Hey, okay, great. But what this is going to do to the podcast as an industry overall, I don't see it as a good thing.
With the suddenness of a snapping finger, a whole town dies, almost without a trace.
Even if you slit a person's throat, you won't get death this fast.
Almost without a clue, except for a 6-month-old baby and a 60-year-old derelict. They have faced the Andromeda strain and survived. But will anybody else?
The Robert Wise production of the most incredible bestseller of the decade.
The Andromeda strain.
130 minutes of intense excitement.
96 of the most critical hours in world history.
Suspense to last a lifetime.
The Andromeda strain.
Please note, no one will be seated during the last 10 minutes.
Rated G, but maybe too intense for younger children.
The Andromeda strain from Universal.
Issues of privacy, security, and social engineering. It's HackSec.
It is time for HackSec, and we're having to shake up the show a little bit because, I get heated up and things change. So this is something that I actually wanted to go into Gaming Grid and talk about have some fun maybe, and talk about the Game Gear Mini that is coming out. I know, believe me, I know, and it's not good. But I guess we'll save that for the next episode. But this is such an important thing and timely thing to really talk about. And, well, quite frankly, it's a moment where I could say, I told you so. Story I have here, the link is from CoinDesk, but it was all over the place. A few days ago, I saw it originally as a headline on Twitter. I know someone, great listener, shared it in the Telegram group as well. When it was initially getting, kind of in the Explorer tab on Twitter, it didn't have a link. Like it went to a video, but it didn't have a link explaining, wait a minute, what is this all about? And basically it was saying that Minnesota authorities were using contact tracing on arrestees, on arrested protesters. And now we have, and really it's just been in the past day, that we've really gotten some, a little more understanding and a little more color, as they say, on what exactly is, what's that all about? What is this? What are these officials, and police and everything? What are they saying when they say that they're engaging in contact tracing? And of course, because like I said, add that term to your lexicon. And we said this over a month ago. Add that term to your lexicon because it's going to get, it's just a matter of time and it's going to get used against you in far more than in matters of public health, and in as far as like relations to COVID-19 and so on. Well, guess what? We didn't have to wait long for that to happen. Of course, I mean, now, we have the Sovryn Tech saying of any and all data collected, or any and all data that you create can and eventually will be used against you. It's to the point now that basically any and all technology that exists can and will be used against you. I mean, that's really how it feels. But regardless, so the story I have here is from CoinDesk. Here's the headline, and it's from June 2nd, so very fresh. Minnesota official alarms privacy advocates with contact tracing comments. And I want to read some of this because it's going to raise some very good points that were also made by members of the Sovryn Tech Telegram group, and that I second, of course. I've been espousing for quite some time, quite some years, in fact, to get comfortable with being without your phone, whatever that ends up looking like. And amazingly, well, we'll get to the, and that certainly applies to a lot of the, protesting and riots and so on. Amazingly, the end of this article raises perhaps a similar point. We'll talk about it, but here we go. At a press conference Sunday, Minnesota Department of Public Safety Commissioner John Harrington compared the methods police were using to identify protesters to those used to track COVID-19 cases. We've, quote, begun analyzing the data of who we have arrested and begun actually doing what you would think is almost pretty similar to our COVID. It's contact tracing. Who are they associated with? What platforms are they advocating for? End quote, he said. The Department of Public Safety works in partnership with local, state, and federal law enforcement and emergency response agencies. Public health and privacy experts reacted with alarm, saying that conflating law enforcement and contact tracing could hamper COVID-19 tracing efforts by sowing distrust of the process as protests continue across the U.S. Quote, "You need people to engage with contact tracing to save lives during an epidemic," end quote, said Nigel Smart, a Belgian professor who has been a key figure in pushing Europe towards decentralized contact tracing protocols. He said that from a public policy point of view, the statement was both worrisome and short-sighted. Quote, "Making people think that contact tracing could also be used for political or law enforcement may make people less likely to engage with contact tracing during an epidemic, which will lead them to unnecessary loss of life," end quote. This sentiment was echoed by Caitlin Rivers, an assistant professor at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, which is closely tracking the spread of COVID-19 across the U.S. Quote, "This is not contact tracing." There's an exclamation point there, folks, by the way. Reading on. "What is described in this video is police work," end quote, said Rivers in a tweet. Quote, "To see the two linked jeopardizes the credibility of public health, which needs community trust to work effectively," end quote. Protests over police brutality and the death of George Floyd have raged for days in Minneapolis and across the U.S. George Floyd was an African-American man who was killed by police when an officer kneeled on his neck and choked him for more than 8 minutes. The incident was caught on video. The U.S. does not have an official database for tracking police brutality, but boy, you think in all these concerns that they have, how are we going to round up the protesters? How are we going to round up COVID-19 people, people infected? How are we going to round up this? They can't create a national database against their own? Oh, of course they wouldn't. Reading on. Or even a state database, maybe? But according to the research group mapping police violence, last year alone, police killed more than 1,000 people, with black people disproportionately among those killed. The Concerns over undermining contact tracing efforts are exacerbated when Black people are twice as likely to die from COVID-19 in America. Contact tracing is the process of ascertaining whom people infected with, we know what contact tracing is. Government, health experts, and privacy advocates have been debating for weeks how invasive privacy speaking contact tracing tech would need to be. I think they got that off a bit. Look, I want to comment on this for a minute here. Almost every security specialist that has any kind of voice that I've heard talk about contact tracing at this state in the situation, shall we say. We're in June 2020 here, okay? All of them have said contact tracing will not work. It's inherently flawed. And that's not even getting into, and we kind of hinted at it throughout the show, but we also have the fact that Bluetooth, which is a major technology behind this kind of contact tracing, is, it's inherently not secure. It's insecure. There's the bias attack, which, yes, there's patches for that to some degree, but that only works so far. So there are rampant problems with this whole concept, of contact tracing, and most security researchers are saying, they're just like, well, look, this isn't going to work anyway. That's cute that you want to try this, and they're probably going to try other implementations of it, but it doesn't work. It's completely ineffectual. Reading on a little bit, Adam Schwartz, a senior staff attorney at the EFF, was alarmed by law enforcement's suggestion that surveillance of protesters and their beliefs and associations is similar to contact tracing. Quote, public health officials undertaking contact tracing must never share the personal information they collect with police, immigration enforcement agencies, or intelligence officials, end quote, said Schwartz. Quote, in fact, we need new legislation to guarantee this. Likewise, contact tracing should gather the least possible information, retain it for the shortest possible period of time, and use it for nothing except contact tracing, end quote. Now, that's very, very sweet of the EFF to somehow think that A, what they have to say really matters. B, I used to be a supporter, then they got all political. Look, this wouldn't have been allowed to pass and wouldn't have been worked on and implemented so quickly if every government agency didn't see advantages to it being implemented. Otherwise, it would have been, there would have been debate after debate from certain aspects of the political machine that maybe actually have some concern around privacy and so on. But no, and in fact, for the EFF to even be on board with contact tracing does not speak well of them at all when, most of their experts, some of which who I think are even on their board, if they have a board, know that contact tracing isn't going to work. I get where they're coming from. They're saying that, using the term contact tracing, in the context of these protests, okay, is, and if I've been saying riots and whatever, well, anyway, whatever, with these protests, is going to, conflate it, give it a negative connotation and raise privacy concerns. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Of course that's happening. But did you expect anything different? Really? You thought that somehow this was going to be contained to just health concerns? Seriously? And and for them to come out and say, well, this isn't really contact tracing, don't use that term. They're politicians. They're morons. Of course they're going to. But it really is. And I think they really are engaging in it. They're doing so much stuff behind the scenes. The DEA is now being used for surveillance outside of their mandate of drug enforcement. We know that now. BuzzFeed, pulled out the whatever leaked memos that they got on that situation. And that has terrible ramifications within it because it's basically calling out not just, groups that letters begin with A or others, but now it's basically saying, look out for anything that's anarchistic, which, hey folks, I'm an anarchist. I'm the most peaceful guy you're ever going to meet in your life. And I espouse only peace. But it sounds like the DEA is gotten the, carte blanche excuse to see over anarchists. And now, as far as all that's going, it's getting insane. You have ANCOM groups and others, as in anarcho-communists, who are shutting down Facebook groups, because they're afraid that they are going to get, and part of that probably has to do with this contact tracing because it's going to eventually lead to them. And then, was there violent speech on here? We could end up going to jail, blah, blah, blah. I mean, you've got people in some very real fear right now. And I mean, that we didn't even get into what Trump's how he's trying to legislate against social media. That's a whole other ballgame. But this is all to say, it doesn't appear that they're actually using like the new contact tracing abilities, because supposedly you have to have an app installed while the contact tracing can be activated on your iOS device or Android device. And it's like it's a toggle that you would activate. You have to have an app installed in the first place for it to even be toggled on. So as far as using that specific protocol, and even then, that can't be it, because supposedly, Apple and Google, I was told that information would be more or less anonymous unless they're just going to hand it all over at this stage. So they're not engaging in the same. I mean, it's accurate when these commentators are saying you're not doing contact tracing like COVID-19 contact tracing. I don't know what was in the politicians' heads. I mean, I don't think there's anything in their heads, but I don't know what was in their heads thinking of calling this contact tracing. But the concept is the same. And so it's not necessarily unfair at the same time for them to say that it's not COVID-19 contact tracing. But ultimately, if this all ends with people thinking, oh, contact tracing, this isn't good. Yes, the authorities and tech companies will just come up with a different term for the same thing. But I mean, that could be a win if people are vehemently against the whole notion of contact tracing. But the only way to stop anything like this kind of contact tracing or this erosion of your privacy or this collection of your data or this tracking of you is in the last part of this story. I want to read it here. Harry Halpin, a technologist and CEO of NIM, a privacy tech startup, said the technique of contact tracing is the same whether it's detecting, which is what I was just saying, whether it's detecting coronavirus spread or targeting political protesters in the U.S. supporting Black Lives Matter. But that underscores the need for systems that by design don't allow information related to COVID-19 to be shared with law enforcement. Quote, here's his quote. The real danger is that COVID tracing apps in the name of public health will be weaponized against dissidents, which is why we must support decentralized alternatives, end quote, said Halpin. Quote, overall, if possible, here we go. This is what this guy's saying. If possible, always leave your phone at home, even at protests. Woo! Thank you. Thank you. I mean, could someone want to give me a heads up on Harry Halpin? Is he some kind of nut job that I don't know that he's a nut job or something? Because I certainly get called out whenever I mention a name that somebody thinks is a nut job. And so, holy shit, I can't support Sovereign Tech anymore. I'm fucking. And is this guy crazy or something? Because I feel refreshed. Yeah, I'm actually going to use that. I feel refreshed that someone else finally came out and said, overall, if possible, always leave your phone at home, even at protests. Other people get it. Here I am. I'm thinking I'm the only person. Me and maybe some other listeners of the show, we're the only people that are recommending this radical act of not having a smartphone with you at all fucking times of the day. Oh, that's outrageous. Who? No one else would dare recommend that. Brian Sovryn, you are insane. Well, I guess so is Harry Halpin. I guess so are a lot of other people, fortunately, who I've also seen, we can name the names, who have also come out and said, hey, stop carrying your phones around. Now, that gets met with the response of, yeah, but if we don't have the phones, we don't have the cameras, we can't hold, the police accountable, blah, 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 blah. No. There are cameras that existed before there were smartphones. There are technologies that existed for the purpose of recording that existed well before that are still in existence today that you can purchase that are actually cheaper than smartphones. Or if you want, you could buy dumbass burner phones and go out there, strip out the SIM card or whatever. Yeah, but then I can't stream it live. Well, let me tell you another thing, folks, and I'm seeing way too much of it, is there are a lot of people who are using this for 15 minutes of fame. They're using some very serious concerns, some very serious issues, some very serious events to just bolster them fucking selves. And there might be few things worse, because that's more of that what we were talking about earlier. You're not living for yourself, you're living for the fucking crowd. Fuck you. No, I mean, look, if you want to show up at a protest, you want to actually make a statement, okay? Peacefully, hopefully. Don't have your smartphone with you. Because because it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Right now, it appears that law enforcement of all stripes, can't contain what's going on. I mean, the reality that there's more of us than there are of them, okay, in that abstract notion, is really coming to head here. But if you think that months from now, if when this calms down, months from now, if you think they're not going to come back and you're not going to get retroactively bitten in the ass for being a part of these protests, and they're going to have the data to supposedly prove it because of contact tracing, it might as well be called contact tracing. Yes, it's not the same, and it's not using the exact technologies as, the coronavirus spread and tracking that, but it is in the abstract the same. I agree with that. This is going to come back for you. This is the importance of anonymity. I mean, fortunately, it's and amazingly, I don't want to say fortunate, but I mean, amazingly, it's socially acceptable to wear masks right now, to have face coverings on. So nobody's arguing or thinking that you're inherently violent because of that. But then what does the mask matter? In fact, really, what does facial recognition matter? Or, none of those technologies are even needed when you can be traced in such a way. And I mean, and the time will come, because right now I imagine also Google, Apple, and everyone else, I mean, they're probably flooded with data that they can, it's unstructured data that they can't really organize just yet, but eventually they will. And that's going to paint a picture. And when that picture paints you, well, I don't want to think anything, bad or tragic would happen, but I'd be worried. Even if you're not a protester, even if you're just walking to the store, because of the inherently flawed nature actually of specifically the aspect of contact tracing, not necessarily okay, let's find the exact IP of that person, then we know who they are, or their MAC ID or whatever, I mean, just imagine that, how many false arrests there could be. Because you were carrying your phone around and you happen to be in a spot where, a flash protest occurred or something, and you were one of those. No, I was just going to get some avocados. Oh yeah, avocados. That can happen. All of this 2020 has been a year that's highlighted all the cracks in the system. The best thing you can do is learn to live in those cracks, to avoid being even seen by the system. Regardless if you're an activist, protester, go down the list of it. Do what you can to not be seen by it, and of course do what you can to not need it, to not have to subsist off of it as much as possible. And with that, I thank you and leave you to the rest of your day. That'll be it for this episode of Sovryn Tech. I will see all of you on the other side.
Thank you for listening to Sovryn Tech, an Osiris One production. Now go out there and make some trouble.